All right, everybody, welcome to the Eight Figure Product CEO. And today we have Jason Sheffrin, who's president and COO of Ubeat Group, which is a PE-backed furniture company. Okay, so physical goods, lots of supply chain, big company in the $250 to $500 million category, and also having the deal sourcing 100% international or near 100% international. So having to deal with tariffs. Okay, so we're going to talk about furniture goods, small parcel and LTL, and how Jason is steering the company and making it work with tariffs. And he's having to deal with all the same tariffs that most of us are dealing with. So this is going to be an exciting episode. Before we get into the episode, thanks for joining us today. And head over to the website, apexceo.co. On the website, I have an exit readiness calculator. So if you're running a company and you kind of want to see where you stack up, if you're looking to exit the next year, 2 or 3, you want to learn more about what your prospects look like. I've got about 10 questions from a founder's perspective, okay, that you're going to want to know, not from a banker's perspective, and how you can get ready and what you should be working on right now. So that's over at apexceo.co. Go ahead and take the exit readiness test. It only takes like 5 minutes. And all right, so Jason, if you want to, let's jump in here. You want to give a little bit more of a bio about yourself?
All right, I'd be happy to. So I joined Ubeat Group about 7 years ago, and as you mentioned now, run the operations of the company. Roughly 300 associates based in Atlanta, Georgia, and I live here with my wife and 3 daughters, and I've been in the operations area for a long time. So probably for the last 28 years, I've been working on operations and sourcing from China and all over the world. And so the last 5 or 6 years have been really interesting as it relates to supply chain and navigating all of some of these macro events.
Oh yeah, no, this has been, and so before this, I was talking to Jason and how my old company was very similar, although we did appliances. But Jason, you guys sell, so I want to give people a scale of the company, because you sell, I think you said something like 4,000 SKUs, right?
Correct.
Okay, 4,000. So what we're going to talk about is, Jason is steering this company in a way where they are actually moving a lot of their sourcing outside of China. Okay, so that's what we're going to focus on here, and they're doing it quickly. And I'll tell you, I work with clients and they're not able to do it quickly because it's super difficult. Most of the time, if they have tooling, or if there's electronics involved. So we'll look at his challenge. So he's got 3 large warehouses here in the States. They handle all the distribution, the supply chain. You've got 4,000 SKUs. You had, I think you said, over 100 factories. Okay.
Correct. About 125 active factories.
Wow. Okay. So let's start with, how are you moving? You said you're 80% China and you're going to be at the end of the year around 20% or within 12 months, whatever that timeline is. How are you doing it? What does your sourcing team look like? And just how are you even planning that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we are relatively, believe it or not, relatively lean, but an experienced group. So we've got a team based in China. We also have a team in Southeast Asia out of Kuala Lumpur, and the real challenge, right? So just to give a little bit of background, the tariffs and exiting China isn't new for us this year, right? It's been on the radar for a while. Just to lay out some of the numbers, part of the challenge was even with the 301 tariffs. China was still less expensive than relative countries in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and so the challenge was always to be ready to exit China, but the economics never made sense until the most recent trade war, right? The IEEPA tariffs, some of the 232 tariffs, and the IEEPA reciprocal tariffs have really just changed the math dynamic. And so I think step one of how do we go from 75% China, 25% rest of the world to 75% rest of the world to 25% China. Part of it is you've got to have the game plan kind of baked, get into execution as quickly as possible. And so that's where we find ourselves right now, which is now we've just got to really pull the trigger. And it's a combination of making sure you have the right partners, right? And Luke, you've mentioned this before. It's a combination of two types of partners, right? Partners that you're working with in China who are ready to move with you to ex-China. Okay. Yep. So they know your products. They're ready to go. Hopefully they've made some land commitments and they've got partners in those other countries. And then there's green sourcing. There is just, you go out and you find new partners. Okay. And clearly it needs to be a combination of the two. In our scenario, what we've done is we're combining the ex-China with two strategies. One is vendor consolidation. The other is product, is our product and our offering focus. All right. And so in furniture, let's take office chairs, for example. Okay. We might sell 10 different lines of executive office chairs. Okay. But the reality is that 2 or 3 of them are your hero lines. Okay. And the other 7 are lines that you've carried over time. The reality is in the short term, right, you might just carry 3 lines of executive office chairs and partner with those vendors to make sure you're prioritizing and moving quickly. So one of the things that I think could be a pitfall is this concept that you have to transition everything in order to get your volume there. It becomes very much forced prioritization, right? Like what's important to the business. And so if we're at 125 vendors and 4,000 SKUs, my expectation is by the end of the exercise, we're at least half those many vendors, ex-China. And from a SKU, we're a third to 40% lighter. And we're making up for the natural lost revenue through the focus and the growth of the hero product lines.
Yep, some spring cleaning. Okay, mm-hmm. that makes a lot of sense. And that's exactly what I was going to ask is like, how are you going to do? Because that's so many SKUs, and we talked about this earlier. You're not moving tooling, so you're having to make these SKUs somewhere else, and sometimes start from scratch and do QA and all that kind of stuff. So that's quite. Now, what would be so Jason? Just for those folks listening, okay, they've got many of them have way less products, some of them somewhere in the middle. What are the main KPIs? Like, how are you sort of thinking about this and managing this from the leadership level?
No, absolutely. So. The first of all, there's some qualitative and quantitative KPIs. So the North Star for our business is that we have to maintain the quality when we do a transition. Okay. Nothing would short circuit the process more than losing the quality expectations that we've got in the market. That's what we're known for. On a quantitative perspective, as silly and simple as it sounds, it's a lot of Pareto analysis, right? So think about, it's in our world, it's not pure Pareto, but think about the 40% that make up 80% of your revenue. Think about things as it relates to margin. We're going to talk about the uniqueness of furniture, right? But I think this is going to be similar to what you experience in appliances. The external factor right now is tariffs, and tariffs are applied on a import vendor cost basis. And so when you look at vendor costs as a percentage of your wholesale costs, okay, or you think about your product margin, where you have lower relative product margins than say, some electronics or some apparels or things like that, where there's just a lot more markup. A lot of our costs are built into the vendor costs. And so the tariffs are absolutely like they hit us like front on. And so when we look at the items, a lot of it comes down to some margin evaluations and where do they play in the markets, right? There are some items that are very viable when tariffs were low, okay, that had low product margins. Okay, when tariffs go high and you start thinking about these multipliers on your vendor costs now, they make some of these items just this untenable in the market. Even in a increase, right? They would just require a price increase that puts them at a place that consumers wouldn't buy them, right? They sort of become viable in the market. So in terms of like quantitative metrics, right, we want to make sure the P&L stays strong, but that we're moving products that can have a margin structure to support pricing in the market in the future. Because remember, moving out of China, you're not really moving to a lower vendor cost, right? In most cases, we're moving to a higher vendor cost.
Yeah, it's up 10%. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you're up 10. Depends where you go, right?
Yeah.
So even when you're moving, you're still increasing your costs, right? And anyone, and the rest of the world, Southeast Asia isn't being left out of the latest tariffs. Now they might not be getting the tariffs that I would expect that China's going to get, right? But the Southeast Asia countries are still going to get tariffs. So in all of these areas, you've got to look at the market, right? Like, what is the consumer willing to pay? And can your product be priced appropriately in that market? And can you make any money, right? Furniture notoriously is on really thin margins. And so these are trying times.
It's super difficult. So that's really interesting. So you're doing the SKU rationalization, but a major view into that is what's the margin of the SKU, and not only that, but can that SKU actually go up in price? Some can, some can't. And what's the margin? Because over a couple of years, and depending who you're selling it to, and all these variables, some SKUs can have lower margins, other SKUs can have higher margins. So that's a key variable there. But and by the way, I left this out at the beginning, but UBeat Group sells. You guys have like a really strong direct to consumer with 10, 12 different websites. They sell of course to Amazon, but then to many of the major other retailers like the Wayfairs and HD and everybody else, and then 3,000 to 4,000 independent distributors. Okay, so just letting the listeners know. So it's very, their customers are. It's a very large group and in different markets actually as well. But anyways, what for those listening, if maybe if you don't run the P&L. The thing is, if a product, and I'm not saying yours does, so this is just in general, if a product comes in at 45% gross margins and you're selling to these, different folks, Amazons, and even D2C, your contribution margin may be low 20s. I'm just picking this number out, right? Because you have all of these allowances and marketing costs and all these types of things, right? So the tariffs, could just make it or break it, and that's sort of what he's getting to on how to decide which SKUs and sort of using that 80-20 rationale.
And I would point out, Luke, that part of it is the relationship and the expectation that you have with your customer, right? So our customer, like, what do our customers come to UBeat Group for? They understand that we've got really high quality product at prices. Okay, and so if the product itself doesn't meet the promise, okay, that becomes a problem for us. And so again, we keep as our North Star kind of like what are we to our customer, right? We're high quality product at a very, very valued price, and so make sure all of our actions sort of kind of circularly support what we're trying to bring to the market. And so as you can imagine, again, with the numbers that are being thrown around, it puts a lot. It's forcing us to make these big changes quickly, in order to be there for the customers.
And Jason, what did you guys? How have you been buying? So did you guys have to stop all of your shipments? Are you buying now with the current rates? And because you got to replenish inventory, right? So how are you handling it right now?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So when just to sort of walk the tariff walk, right? So you had the 301 tariffs at 25% for you. years now, right? And so a lot of people forget that China's already at 25%. And then you wound up with the IE fentanyl tariff. So then you're up to 45%. And then you wound up with the IEPA reciprocal, which was 34, which put you up to percent. Okay. And then when the tariff went to I think we got up to about 180%. Okay. With the tit for tat trade war, 80%, right? It in essence was an embargo.
Yeah,
we had to stop.
Nobody could order.
There is no scenario where you can import at that level. And so I think practically all importers that have that balance risk, right? Like, could you have rolled the dice? Sure, right? But I think that you have to trust that whatever's prevailing in the market is the prevailing thought, right? And so at that rate, you have to stop importing. And so when we stopped importing, again, for the last, probably for the last 2 years, but really more quickly in the last 6 months, we've been working on the ex-China strategy. But boy, did that light a fuse, right? Because to your point, Luke, inventories start to run low, and they're going to run low for everybody, right? This is, this, you can't start and stop. Supply chains don't start and stop so good.
No. Yeah. So exactly. So that's the same thing. Basically everybody stopped ordering. Now the rates are down, and I guess everybody has to order, right? Because otherwise, you're going to run your inventory. So then, somehow everybody with the product has to still be profitable. So price increases have to move in, which is challenging. Like now you guys control a lot of D2C, so that's fantastic. You're in control of that, but it's difficult working with sort of the larger partners. How do you guys message that, and anything you're able to share on that end?
No, I'd be happy to. I mean, again, we go back to our value proposition. Side, it has to be a value to the customer. And so what we've looked at and communicated to our customers is that margin percent is not what we. Okay, we're not looking to margin up on or take advantage of tariffs. What we need to do is figure out what is the minimal amount that we need to raise pricing to maintain profitability in terms of a dollar perspective. And so the communication, and I'll tell you, the retailers that we work with, the communications have been reasonable, right? Like they more reasonable than you'd expect. Okay. And I think part of it is when you approach, especially with our pro product, okay, where we're familiar with the cost structure in general of furniture, it's a conversation that generates a bit of respect when you're willing to just share facts, and everyone recognizes that you're not being greedy. Like this is not a time to be greedy. This is a time to sort of work with your partners to figure out how you survive, right? How do you survive? How do you allow customers to continue to buy furniture? Because remember, this is a little bit different than COVID, for instance, right? Like during COVID, there was like stimulus. In this scenario, everything's going up in pricing, right? So it's not like we're an isolated commodity, right? Consumers will have less money to spend, okay? And furniture.
I think by the way, that's a great point that people forget. Because during COVID, prices went way up. Everybody was rolling in the cash. Oh wow, we could sell this for double the price, and that's not happening right now. Okay, people they're not getting government checks. That's a great difference between now and then. So it's much more challenging.
Yeah, and in fact, during COVID, you had nothing else to spend money on. You weren't going out. You weren't. But now you got the service industry. Everything's still alive. And anyway, so the point on price is I think we all have to come together, and at least that's the way we're approaching our partners. As it's just math, right? It's math. Let's open the book. Let's show you the math, and the numbers. When you go through the math, there really isn't a way to talk about right? Like, hey, why don't we just swallow this? But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be Armageddon, right? It's um, especially if you're doing smart things to manage sort of where you're sourcing. Because, like I said,
Mhm.
even moving ex China comes with a cost increase, right?
Yeah.
So there's really not a scenario where go up. And like I said, in a lot of durable goods, right? Manufacturers, distributors, suppliers, they're not on big margins, right? That it's a fallacy to think that these are sitting on double digit, you know, profit margins. That's just, I don't think that's the reality in a lot of these industries. Um,
Yeah, no, it's just the scenario I brought up. You're lucky if you're in the low 20s contribution, then you have your SG&A. I mean, every business is a little different. Yeah, there's so many variables in there, and then now we have potentially supply chain in front of us. Now, we didn't talk about this, and you don't have to give it away, but I'm guessing furniture. Some of your stuff is LTL, so I'm just totally guessing, but I bet your average container is less than 100,000. I'm just, but maybe you
yeah,
guys pack it really well. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So, right.
I know
So,
where
so
you're going.
yeah, you know where I'm going. Well,
Yeah,
hold on, Jason, you probably still have like PTSD from, the supply chain after COVID. So yeah. So then, our containers went up to 20,000. And if your container value, the actual goods in there is like 50,000, let's just say, I mean, it goes. And prior to that, most people don't realize it was only like $1,500. It was so cheap to get a container here. Okay, so and your goods are larger. Just so the audience knows, about you guys are like 50/50 small parcel LTL. Okay, so if that container isn't super dense, uh, and what do you think is going to happen, or what are you hearing? But I'm thinking there's got to be some sort of supply crunch because everybody stopped ordering. Now they're
there's
all ordering for Christmas. Yeah, so we might get some of the same, right?
you're gonna get a very very similar bullwhip effect, right? And there's you can always count on the bullwhip, right? And
Yeah.
for those listening, like the bullwhip is, the tip of the bullwhip is very small, but by the time it gets to the handle, it's a really big wave, and it happens, and it continues to happen. It actually goes back and forth, and we saw that during COVID, time and time again. But there's absolutely seen it because we've got the reprieve right now on the China reciprocal. Um, Even if you can get the rates, and the rates are up, I believe the June price increase on the spot market was $3,000 a container.
Oh, huge!
Just
Wow.
so May to June went up through container already. Even if you can get the rate, getting space, you're not going to get the space, right?
Yeah.
And so we're right back into it. And this one, again, this is tricky. Part of the challenge was the start and stop, right, of the tariff, right? So when they started, a lot of carriers took capacity off the Trans-Pacific lane, right? Like they blank sailed, they reallocated. Is a lot of factories sent people home, right? Like, and so all of a sudden the reprieve comes up, and it's like, hey, we need all this product now. Well, the factories weren't ready. Like the factories were trying to watch out for their own financials, right? The U.S. market was shut down.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have they don't have raw, like, and even if they have their own workers, their raw material suppliers might not have workers. So I go back to, it's a combination of starting up the supply chain that quickly is really really problematic, and anytime you have this many, it's an opportunity for the carriers, the ocean carriers, the vendors, you name it, to take advantage of the situation. Now, if you have good
Yeah.
relationships with your vendor, it's not likely, but ocean carriers never pass up a good crisis, and so you really need a good forwarder. I don't know if I can give our forwarder is fantastic. Can I give them a little bit of a plug? Is that all
Yeah.
right? If is that was like,
Absolutely.
uh, we're with a forwarder called Clasquin, CLASQUIN, and they
Oh.
have just not just during COVID and the supply chain Armageddon, but even now they are just unbelievable partners, right? As it
Mhm.
relates to helping navigate, like, you need a partner, whether it's them
Uh,
because I might have broken up there, but
yeah,
your
yeah,
freight forwarder.
you broke up, but he's talking about how important your freight forwarder is,
Yep.
and just the partnership. Yeah, because you're hammering them all the time when they're not getting things done, right? So
Well,
they're on the auto, they're on the speed dial.
no, and so if you do have a great partner, they can get you on the boats, right?
Yeah.
They can move your cargo. And if you don't have a great partner, you might not be moving any freight. And the challenge is, depending upon what happens, the penalties for missing these windows gets really big, right? Like, so after, the 10% at a minimum goes up to 34, based on the latest posts on Truth Social. Things don't sound like they're going that great. So,
Yeah, exactly.
It's anyone's guess what happens after the 90-day pause.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'm glad you said that, because the thing is, everything's going up in price. Your products are going up in price. The shipping getting here is going up in price. You guys run three, large warehouses. Probably, labor is probably going up. How about domestic freight and LTL? I haven't had to negotiate that in a while. How's is that also up, or is that not up as much?
Again, the domestic market is, compared to the international inbound market, is sort of a reprieve, right? It doesn't mean it's not changing, doesn't mean it's going up. The dray, right? Dray obviously moves really quickly as you get congested with the ports and things like that. But our biggest concern in terms of costs right now are the combination of the tariffs and then managing the inbound freight. Like,
Yeah.
that,
And then oftentimes, oftentimes there's something you could do with the factories, but you're going to be renegotiating all of it because you're moving it to a new countries and new factories. So you'll have that opportunity to negotiate it. How do you guys think about that? Do you put anything you can share on that? Do you have kind of process with different factories, and you sort of move through it and see who the winner is going to be, and then anything that you're able to share would be awesome for listeners on that side.
I'd be happy to. And so I apologize if this sounds too basic, but sourcing isn't about haggling. Like,
Right.
so a lot of people want to become buyers or become sourcing. They're like, I'm negotiate. I'm going to get a better price. Sourcing is about partnership and understanding your product, right? And so, I'll be in Malaysia in 2 weeks, in Thailand. Like, if you want to make this work, right, and you want to have a good partnership, you have to be with your factories, you have to be with your vendors, you have to actually understand their economics, you have to understand the process that it takes to make your product. Like, if you don't know how your product is made, you can't really negotiate it. Okay. And the vendor will see you coming a mile away, right? Because it's an American, right? All the American wants is to make sure that they get 15% reduction, right? So they'll just pick a number, and you're going to be the happiest guy in the world. We're gonna negotiate, and you're going to get me to lower my price 15 to 20%. The way that I do it, and I've been doing it my career, is you form a real partnership, right? A partnership where the vendor still has to make some money, okay? And you are incented to find the best way to produce that product possible. All right, what is the best supply chain? What is the best process? What are the best jigs? What is the best order quantities? Does it make sense for the raw materials to come from China? Does it make sense to locally source the raw materials? How important is speed, right? What can you give on? What you have to? And in these scenarios, again, if you're not partnership oriented, there'll be plenty of other people that can buy that capacity, and vendors want to work with good partners. And so the negotiation, again, it's a reset, and that's why it's like the market. You got to make sure you have a price, right, that you can support in the market, right? Because at the end of the day, when I go back to the original, like, even if the real cost is $100, but the consumer is only willing, 120, there isn't going to be enough in that to bring it to the end of the day. You about the viability product, and then partner factories. And in that way, we have found the factories to be very understanding, and a bit excited. We actually talked to some of our China factories who are moving to ex-China. This is a move that they've been looking to do, but it's never made economic sense before. So in a weird way, I'm not saying this is universally felt, right? But in a weird way, some of China happy about the tariffs, because China doesn't want to be stuck making furniture and apparel. China wants to evolve their infrastructure and supply chain also, right?
Yep.
And this might have been the kick in the butt they needed to move into the higher value end of the sectors, right? Energy, automotive, aerospace, services. And get out of apparel and textiles and furniture. But now they're like managing manufacturing in other countries. So
Right, they'll own it. Yeah, they'll own a lot of these operations.
So the part that's a little backwards is some of the people that I've spoken to in China see that as not China. They actually see it as good for China.
That is really interesting. And I think what resonated there and what everybody should listen to is you got to get in front of your customers. I know we all know that for sales, and we still don't do it, right? You have to get in front of your customers on sales. That's like sales 101, and actually some of the best advice I ever received, because we get tired of all the flights. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you got to get out to Asia, and those are even tougher flights. The bonus is the culture, they treat you amazing, right? I mean, you're going to have your you'll have gosh, what's that stuff called, the hairy crab, when in certain parts of China. You ever have those?
Yeah, and a little bit of baijiao
in Ningbo. So look, it's not all bad, but it's a lot of, you're not sleeping very much, but you have to get in front of your clients. And if you have buyers in between the factories, then that's even another additional problem, for the smaller companies. But Jason, I think that's super valuable. Why don't we finish this up just by understanding, so you're doing a lot more than just having to deal with the tariffs. You have the whole supply chain, because as president and COO, you have so much going on. What are just for those other leaders listening, give us like your top 3 KPIs, or maybe it's ways that you manage people, like what's important, either information or results that you're after with your team, that would be helpful for other leaders.
Absolutely. So I would say that, and there's not necessarily a direct KPI for this, but in a time of crisis, and you have to determine the crisis, but this crisis is going to wind up being a supply crisis. Okay. The coordination between sourcing, inventory, and sales, okay, becomes vital. Okay, because you're shortage dynamics. So right now we're watching fill rates. Fill rates become vital. Fill rates are more, and the way we measure fill rates is not based on, we measure it as sort of the potential of orders versus what you filled, right? So your fill rates become really vital, because that's your of the impact the shortages are going to have. Okay. The next, right, that we like to see in terms of the metrics is really around just margin management. Okay. And the reason I say that is because you have so many costs changing, right? Your traditional, like, steady as they go, right? Like, you got every cost element in the entire business changing right now. And you can find yourself upside down, okay, if you're not careful. And so, and those are really, like, if you want to be simple, right, manage your margins and manage your fill rates, and then make sure that your company is collaborating. There is no time for politics, bureaucracy. If you have a high vendor cost, China or ex-China even, any little mistake has big consequences, because everything's got a multiplier on it.
Yeah, and how do you manage margin? What do you like to look at? Because the thing is, because I know your type of business really well, and there's a lot of different allowances on the backside of some of these sales, right? And some of these things, depending on your ERP, hopefully they come through in your monthly financial review, but then some of them are even customer dependent. I mean, it's a hard task. Okay, you have all the SKUs,
It is a
and
hard
then some of
task.
these SKUs are being sold to 30 different customers, and it's like, man, finding out where your by the way, shout out to Kazi. Okay, if you use NetSuite, you probably don't, but if you did,
Mhm.
but anyways, it's a software investment that I have. But anyways, they're going to automate a lot of this with AI. Okay, they're going to get in there and be able to tell you these details of where the margins are being built out. But anyways, yeah, how do you manage that? I mean, do you have like something where you're just looking at like the product margins, and then you already know that this percentage
So,
is cut out, or how do you
yeah,
handle that?
so we actually have a really nice instance of Tableau set up,
Okay.
like a business intelligence tool.
Yep.
And most important, like the first thing that any company develops when you put in a margin calculator, right? Like let's
Mhm.
load in all our customers, let's load in all our products, and let's make sure that as a business we have control. And and so we're able to actually do, like, again, it's we can keep our finger on the business really well.
Yeah, that's great. Did you guys set that up yourselves, or you have to bring in consultants to do that?
A combination of the two. A
Yeah,
combination of the two.
yeah. So yeah, so that's a really nice one to have. If companies can afford that as like a middle step, but then you get super accurate data because you're able to kind of have better inputs. And sometimes in your financials, you're not able to drill down that deep. So that's kind of the beauty of a system that you're talking about. Cool. So Jason, thanks for sharing all this wisdom. I think it's gonna be super valuable on the tariff side. Just to finish up here, let us know how folks can get a hold of you and find out about Ubique Group.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Our website is www. .theubiquegroup.com, and I'm on LinkedIn at Jason Sheffrin. I'm also Jason Sheffrin at theubiquegroup.com. So happy to
Wonderful.
connect with your listeners, and it's a pleasure, Luke. Like I said, it's I've listened to your cast and heard you speak many times. So um,
Cool.
you're very valuable to the people out there. So thank you.
Thanks again, Jason. Appreciate everything.
You bet.